Everyone. My name is Kimberly Becker, and today we're going to be talking about leveraging AI in research writing. So, just a little bit about what you can expect. I'm first going to talk about how writing and research is still writing and research, no matter what tools we use, no matter what extra help we get. And I'm really going to try to frame this from the perspective of ethics and integrity, because I think people have a lot of questions and we don't necessarily have answers, but we can guide you in maybe asking the right kinds of questions and in really helping your own, I guess, barometer of right and wrong to move in the right direction. So that's first. And then I'll talk about AI literacy. I'll give you just some quick and dirty tips about how to kind of understand AI. Neither Jessica nor I are machine learning experts. We're not computer scientists. These are tools that anybody can learn about, kind of how they work under the hood, and just a little bit of knowledge there goes a long way. And then I'll finalize the presentation with kind of a long list of tips and tools, and then we'll have time for some question and answer at the end. So that's my plan. So just a little bit about me. My background is in linguistics. So the study of language, and specifically I'm an applied linguist, which means that I understand the theory of how languages work, and then I apply that to a certain context. And in my case, it is and has always been academic writing, specifically research writing for publication purposes, for graduate school, for any kind of disciplinary academic writing. And I'm a corpus linguist, which means that I study big data sets of language. And if you think about what AI is, and you might not know this, but I'll help you understand that a little bit, is really what AI functions on is a big corpus, a big data set, a big database of text, of information that it's kind of pulling from and patterning out. And so that's why I'm well positioned to talk about this, because I've been working with corpora for a number of years. I'm a former professor, and I'm a writing coach and a consultant, and just generally a champion for ethical AI tools. Again, not an AI expert, just an enthusiast. And I really want to help people understand how to apply this ethically. Okay, so let's jump right in and let's talk about the core human challenge. So, research writing is fundamentally about scholars developing and communicating their ideas. And this was true long before AI, and it's still true. Okay. And so, one of the things that we need to think about when we center our work on the human element first is how to make decisions about when and how to use any tool, whether it's AI, whether it's just any other technological tool, or whether it's a human who's helping us. And so, one thing I want you to think about here is there's a paradox of efficiency. And sometimes what seems like maybe a shortcut, which is how these AI companies are marketing their products to us, that can actually kind of extend our process by creating distractions and rabbit holes that really get us off track. So, our true efficiency is going to come from understanding our own research and our own writing goals thoughtfully, and then integrating these tools where they genuinely help. So, this is just one of many different writing technologies. All writing tools are technological. People have always been concerned that new tools will diminish human capabilities, and we have always adapted. If you look way back to ancient writing systems, hieroglyphics, paper and ink, printing press, typewriters, word processors, this is an evolution of tech and human writing that has been going on for long before AI. So we are adapting. That's what's happening right now. And that's why I said it's very emergent, because we don't have these hard and fast rules yet for what makes this okay, what makes this not okay. And so that's where we're coming from here. But I just want to reassure you that writing itself is a technology, and all these tools we have, these are questions that have been asked by people for a number of years. So it is new ground, but we have some guidance from looking back at history. And that's why it's important to look at AI literacy as a form of upskilling ourselves. Just like when the internet came along, we had to learn how to search for things on the internet. This is another kind of upskilling. And if you think about what's happening in the world, like just think about headlines. We see a lot of really kind of crazy headlines about scientists can't stop using AI to write, ethical concerns, AI in academia, can researchers write their articles by artificial intelligence? And these are the kinds of questions that people ask us all the time. And so, what I want to start with here is just sort of kind of reframing some commonly asked questions that I get about this. And the first one is this: if I use AI for polishing and correcting the language of my writing, will it be detected as AI generated? Okay, so I'm going to start with these big questions. And then as the presentation goes along, I'm going to try to sort of answer these questions through my talk. So, this common question I think could better be framed by saying, how can I be transparent about AI use? Or how can I be confident that I could defend my work? So, just like if you were working with a human, you would want to be transparent about that, right? You would want to say, okay, I got help. I had a co author, or I had a tutor, or I had a coach. So, just asking, will it be detected? Is it right or wrong? Really isn't quite the right question. The truth is that we don't really know yet. We don't have good answers to these questions. And it's an empirical question. Will it be detected? I don't know, because AI detectors are inaccurate. They're all over the board. So rather than trying to evade detection, I recommend thinking about this through the lens of transparency. And so, as I'm talking, I want you to think about, okay, well, how could I maintain my authentic voice as I'm using these tools? And how would I be prepared to demonstrate my understanding? If someone asked me, would I have a record? How would I submit this? How would I maintain those records? And so that's kind of how I'm approaching this, is just to sort of shift our questions. Because I don't have answers, because these are emergent ethical questions, I want to shift us into sort of asking better questions. We'll share these slides with you, but here are 3 really great tools about AI detection. So AI detection sort of leads the charge for lots of different questions that we get as consultants about, what's right and what's wrong. So I'm not gonna say much about this. I'm just gonna share these slides with you later so that you can read up and see what kind of scholars are saying about this. I'm providing a literature review here in a set of slides, and also a couple of articles from people that I really respect in this field, so that you can because knowledge is power. And so that's all I'm going to say about that. One more question that we commonly get asked is about this idea of, is there any problem with AI programs that sort of bypass detection? And if not, what are some examples? So, yes, there are lots of programs like this. And again, it's an empirical question about, can they bypass detection? I don't know. I don't use them, because my better question I'm asking myself is, how can I use generative AI as a coach instead of a ghostwriter? So I'm not trying to replace my voice. All right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's really hard to answer these questions, and it's very emergent. And so what we want to do is just shift it into a better question zone, so to speak. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. Okay. Let's zoom out. And let's first talk about, when we're saying research writing, what do we mean by research writing, and what does that look like? Most of the time, when people talk about writing, they are thinking about this bottom kind of piece of the triangle here, okay? Now, this is a framework that we have in linguistics to explain how second language writers learn to write in another language. I use it in the research writing space because I believe that research writing, academic research writing, is like a second dialect. And so we can apply this second language theory to us learning how to write in the research space. And we all have to learn it, whether we're native speakers or not of the language that we're publishing in, we all have to learn it. It's a new way of communicating. And there's three aspects. And most of the time, as I said, people sort of are thinking down here. They're thinking of precision, mechanics, spelling, grammar, punctuation, maybe citation formatting. I hear APA 7 a lot. But this is just one tiny piece of a grand scheme of what it means to do writing, any kind of writing, but especially complex research writing. There's also, in addition to accuracy, there's flow. Flow means smooth expression, clear connections, fluency of communication. And then beyond that, there's depth. And this has to do with variety of language, range of language, your ideas, your sources, and your analysis. And notice how depth is the biggest piece of this inverted triangle. And so, what I think right now, this is my current kind of emerging thought, is that for depth purposes, this is the firmly human aspect of writing. This is where we want to embed ourselves. If we're thinking about what kind of language to use, the range, the ideas, the sources, the analysis of our research and our topics, that's very human. And we want to keep it pretty human. And then if we're thinking about flow, we could maybe think about some hybrid human AI connections. And then if we're thinking about accuracy, this is something I think we can absolutely automate. I think there are really good tools on the market right now for automating precision, like mechanics, spelling, grammar, punctuation, and even citation format. So when we talk about writing, we really have to think about which aspect of writing are we talking about? And then we can drill down and answer that question of what's right or what's wrong, and how transparent do I need to be about that? So when you think about AI, we have this name generative, right? And we think of like it's generating text. But really, there's a spectrum of ways that we could use AI. We could use it completely, like this synthetic writing. This would be generating our text fully, automating it. But we could also have different levels of human involvement. If we look at the opposite side of that, human writing, independent human writing, would have no automation at all. Maybe just a pen, maybe your keyboard, something like that. But even then, with our current technologies, we're still getting some help, right? Think about your writing in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and maybe you've got Grammarly, and so you're getting spelling suggestions, you're getting grammar suggestions. So it's really hard to separate, where the line is between where a human stops and where a technology starts, because we are so embedded in a world with technology everywhere. But I just want to draw your attention to the fact that generative doesn't mean that it has to do everything for you. There's a range of things that we can do in a range of different independence levels. And so this is a new way to think about writing, and it's a new way to think about incorporating technology into our writing. So if we sort of flip that inverted triangle onto its side, and we think about it in this kind of axis, what we want to do is think about the human maintaining independence at the level of depth. If we're working with ideas, if we're working with synthesis and sources, and we really want to maintain our strong hold on that, because that's a key aspect of what it means to be a writer and what it means to have our human perspective embedded in that writing. But as we go into flow and into accuracy level issues with writing, I think it's okay to give up a little more control and cede that control to a machine. I think it becomes more and more okay, and we can release that a little bit as we move from depth to flow to accuracy, if that makes sense. The reason that I am saying this is not just coming from my mind. There's a lot of research now on this idea of post-plagiarism and how historical definitions of plagiarism are going to change. And as AI becomes more and more embedded into our workflows, it's going to change more rapidly. So human and AI hybrid composition is becoming more of the norm, more the standard academic practice. And what we want to do is maintain human control and and responsibility, even as we are moving toward letting AI take over a little bit. And again, coming back to this idea of like, what are we using it for? Are we using it to develop depth in our writing? Are we using it to develop flow? Or are we using it to develop accuracy? I think we can do this to a bigger or lesser extent. But the bottom line is that humans may relinquish control in some things, but never responsibility. The responsibility is always ours. So again, coming back to that question, how would I defend this? Could I defend this? If someone asked me, whether it was my professor or a journal editor or anybody, how would I defend what I wrote? Okay, so with that, let's jump into a little bit of AI literacy so that we can understand what's under the hood of these tools. The research says basically that success with students, graduate students, or novices of any kind using AI to do some higher level professional work is that they have to have AI literacy and they have to have a strategic approach. That means tools must be taught and we must tailor our training to specific context. So if that's the research says, then I want to kind of move on from that by saying that Jessica and I developed an AI literacy framework. And it's not purely a technical competency. This framework really is about integrity and wholeness in academic practice. And the framework has 3 basic parts. So this is, if you've ever seen one of our presentations before, I'm sure you've probably seen this visual. If not, we have a white paper on it. I've linked it here for when you get a copy of this slideshow. You can look at the white paper and read more about it. But we consider it an extension of digital literacy. And so to help us understand and consider the kind of skills we need in this world that is covered up and consumed with AI, where we really no longer even have a choice as to whether we're going to use it, it's becoming embedded. We designed this framework so that people can understand sort of how to learn about it, where to start, and then how to expand it from there. So there's 3 parts, and we start with functional. And the functional literacy is here in the smallest circle of the framework. Functional literacy means that you understand what it means to operate and interact with digital technologies. And this emphasizes the need to acquire basic technological competency to function proficiently in a digital environment, whether it's AI or anything else, but we're expanding it to AI. This started out as just digital literacy in general. And then once we have that functional understanding, we can build on that to critical literacy. Critical literacy. Critical literacy is when we push beyond mere functionality to encourage people to think about analyzing and questioning the cultural, social, and ethical implications of digital technologies. And this helps us to foster an even deeper understanding of how these tools shape and are shaped by societal forces and power dynamics. And then the final piece of the puzzle is what I'm calling situational or academic literacy. And so this means that in whatever context you're in, which for us is academia, we need to understand what it means to write as an author for a certain audience with a certain purpose in mind. Taking responsibility for final output, differentiating classical plagiarism from Gen AI use, and really understanding the ethical application to those tasks. So with that as the framework, I'm going to give you a little taste of each of those along the way, starting with functional AI literacy. So what's happening under the hood? First of all, what do we mean when we say AI? Well, AI is a big general term, and it really has a lot of sub aspects. So when we say AI, we really mean machine learning and deep learning. And then when you sort of put it all together, what we're talking about today in this specific presentation is a specific type of AI called generative AI. And generative AI functions on a large language model. That's why when I first heard about ChatGPT, I got so excited because, as I said before, I'm a corpus linguist. So that large language model, those are the things that I had been working with for a number of years. And so it's taking that huge set of data and it's generating from that in new and novel ways by pattern recognition and prediction. So let's talk about what that means. A large language model works essentially by prediction. So if we start kind of here in the middle and we have this huge data set of information that has been scraped from Wikipedia, scraped from open access journal articles, websites, blogs, all kinds of things, that becomes the model. And so when you put in a prompt into the model, like let's imagine you said the color of the sky is, without any extra context, the model might predict that it's blue, okay? And so if that's the case, then it's just functioning on the most common thing in its data set, yeah? But let's imagine that we change and we want to say, okay, it's raining. The color of the sky is what when it's raining? Now, the model is going to use that context to come up with another word. Instead of blue, it's going to be gray. So this is a very, very simplified form of this, but basically it's just taking a context and it's expanding on that and predicting what the next word is going to be. So this is why if you're using a large language model, and that's just like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, there's many different brands of those. If you're using a large language model for academic purposes, what it may be predicting here can be real or it can be not real, because to the model, it's just a word. It's just a predictable word. And so it could be hallucinating, could be fabricating, and it could be fabricating a source. And that becomes really problematic, right? Because this word here, it's confidently wrong sometimes. Now, it's confidently wrong less than it used to be. And as models get better, that percentage goes up where it's going to be right. But we, in a complex world of academic research, have to be really on guard to make sure that it's not just a word, it's like a phrase, a sentence, a whole concept, a whole idea. But this is the functional understanding of prediction that you need to have before you can move on to the next step, which is critical AI literacy. Now, I'm not going to say much about this because we have a lot on YouTube. Moxie has a YouTube channel where we go in depth in critical and webinars, critical AI literacy webinars, where I drill down and go into lots and lots of examples about this. But basically, we know from research that these large language models can be biased because they were taken from human data that was already biased. And so it is not a question, is it biased or not? We know that it is. The answer is yes, they are biased towards certain groups of people, okay? So with that in mind, we just need to think about why. And again, I'm going to go really quickly through this because if you want to go and delve deeper, you can do that through our YouTube channel. But there's two basic kinds of kind of weird outputs that AI can provide you. So I want to just say very quickly, there's two kinds of weird that you really want to know about and need to know about. The first is just the weirdness that happens because of neural networks. We don't really understand, even machine learning, they understand how it works, but they don't necessarily understand why it predicts and produces the text that it does. So they're just so complex that it's almost impossible to know the connections they make. So they're weird, okay? Weird is a word I'm using just in the general sense of the term, like kind of unexplainable. And so we have to be critical because we can't really explain it. And then there's another reason that they're weird. And this comes from this idea of weird as an acronym, meaning Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So as a researcher, if you know these two things, your guard has to be up. No matter how good the program is, you're still the human in control. And so you really have to start thinking about, okay, what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for unexplainable things and I'm looking for biased things in the sense of Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Okay. And then let's move on now. So again, I know that was fast. I just want to get you kind of thinking about these things. And let's talk about situational AI literacy in the academic context, because I think that's why you came here. Situational academic AI literacy is best approached through some examples, some workflows. So I have come up with a few things that most of us do as academic researchers. And I think this will help you to see this kind of in your real world, in the real kind of everyday questions that you ask, everyday problems you need to solve. And the workflow looks something like this. I'm going to talk about seeding your research, so getting ideas from the literature. I'm going to show you some example tools called Litmaps, and I'm going to show you Perplexity. I'm not going to dive deep. I'm just going to tell you that I really like these tools. These are some of my favorites. Then I'm going to talk very quickly about Elicit and help you understand how Elicit can provide a literature matrix or help you think through your literature matrix or an evidence table. You may have heard it called that. And then finally, I'm going to show you some examples of using Moxie for planning, for drafting, and for doing the kind of actual work of the writing. Okay. Let me pause there just really quickly, though, and just ask Jessica, is there anything that I need to stop and answer or...
No, the chat is quiet and there's no Q&A. So if you do have questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and I can answer them while Kimberly is presenting.
Okay. Yeah, I know this is we're moving really fast, and I'm sorry, but you'll have the slides, and you have access to all of our YouTube videos. If you wanna dive deeper into any of this, you can. I promise you, we have at least one video on each one of these things that I'm talking about. Okay, let's start with Litmaps. So Litmaps is a company that helps researchers find research. There are lots of these companies. Some of them I like better than others, and I talk about that in my Substack. Jessica and I write about this. We talk about it on YouTube. But basically, think about the idea of like seeding your thought process. So when you come to research, you never just research because you have a great idea and you really want to watch it bloom. You have to position that idea within the literature, which is a conversation that is already happening out there amongst scholars. And part of the difficulty as a graduate student is sort of like, how do I join that conversation that's already happening as a novice when I know nothing? It's really, really hard. But these tools can kind of help us to, what I love about Litmaps, I guess, is that it helps us to see like where these things fit in the conversation. So whereas before AI, we had more just like lists of different sources, Litmaps is a tool that can help us envision who's talking about what, who they're citing, when they cited them, how they're citing it, and how that's all connected. So this is why I really like Litmaps. What you do with Litmaps is you start with a search term, just like you would with any other database. You'd have a keyword. You could use a Boolean operator here. I'm just showing you an example with AI and research writing. That's what I'm interested in. So that's what I put in as my search term. And then what happens is Litmaps goes to work and it outputs a map. That's why it's called Litmaps. But you have to know how to read it, okay? So just bear with me here. On the left side, you get your list, like you always have with research, where you have like, here's a source, here's a source, here's a source, and here's a source. And there's more, but it gives you maybe 8, 10 sources. And then it provides a map to show you how to read this conversation that is happening in the literature, okay? And it's an XY axis. So in terms of the x-axis, this is how current the research is. So for example, over here, it's earlier, and over here, it's more recent, okay? So older, newer, and that goes from left to right. So you can see that this Lee, I think I can't really even read this. Let me see if I can. Lynn and Yakchi and Pandy. These are, from older to newer. Now, this is still 2020 to 2024, so we're not talking about a grand, long thing because the topic is AI in research writing. So if you put in a topic that's been studied for decades, then of course you're going to get different years. And then from bottom to top, you've got how well cited this is. And so, of course, there is a correlation between how old it is and how well cited it is, or there should be. And if there's not, then that means it's old, but nobody cited it. That also is important information, right? Because it means people haven't found this useful. And so when you look at this, you can see that these up here and the circles get bigger according to their level of importance. And that means how many times they were cited, and like how sort of prolifically they are being cited in the literature. So this gives you a snapshot of a conversation. And then you could go back, you can change your search terms, but you can also click on any of these and read more about them and link to the article if you want to read more. So I really like Litmaps for starting out in the world of AI and research because, again, what challenges novices is that you're not just researching because you're interested in it. You're interested in it, and it's important in the existing scholarly literature. And so you're trying to join that conversation. So Litmaps helps you envision how you're going to join that conversation in a way that we could not do prior to AI. Litmaps does have a free version, but as with any tool, if you want to use it a lot, you will have to pay for it. And so I just think it's a really good place to start. I think they have a great database on the back end, but later I'm going to give you some warnings about that database. So just bear with me there. I'm going to kind of return to that. So that's Litmaps. Perplexity has a wonderful interface that allows you to do deep research and reasoning. So you've probably heard about deep research. You may have heard there's a lot of buzz now that this is kind of a newer thing in the AI world. It's coming out of a Chinese company. And so Perplexity is a tool that allows you to use that deep research reasoning to find sources. I'm not going to demo this, but Perplexity allows you to do this if you have a pro account. So this one, you can't try the reasoning unless you have a pro account. And so for that reason, I'm not going to say much more about that. I'm quite impressed with it, but I have a pro account. And so I've been able to play with it. It still requires care, but there's a lot of potential there. So I'm just giving you some things to think about so you can go explore on your own. Okay. And then the last tool that I want to talk about in terms of finding literature is Elicit. Elicit is another great company that helps you find research. And then Elicit's claim to fame, so unlike Litmaps, which is very visual, Elicit is visual in a different way. So if you've ever heard of a literature matrix or an evidence table where you have kind of in the first column, you have maybe a study, and then you have in other columns aspects of a study, like you might have participant numbers or ethnographic details, or you might have methodology, you might have basic findings. And so you can build out this table. And the way Elicit works is that you can do 2 columns for free. And then if you want more columns to help you understand that literature a little bit better, then you have to pay for it. And so that's what we like to suggest for people who are working with evidence tables or literature matrices. Elicit is a company that Jessica and I are very impressed with their ethical application and how they're approaching this. Like I said, there's a lot of other companies that do this. these are companies that we really can support. They also have lots of tutorials and lots of other things that you can dive deep and look at how to do this in more detail. Okay, be careful. When you are looking for literature, there are two major issues that I think everybody needs to know. And one is macro and one is micro. Okay. So the macro, and this is coming from me as a corpus linguist, the macro issue is that, as you know, that AI is tapping into a database, just like you can go to a database in your library, go to your library website, Google Scholar, that's a database. And so whatever's in that database, it's limited, right? Not everything is there because not every article is free and open source. Some articles, unfortunately, you have to pay for, or your library has to have a subscription. And so if the corpus is incomplete, then you're not going to find what you might be looking for. And you may think, oh, nobody's doing this work. This is a great topic for me because nobody's doing this work. But that's not really what's happening. What's happening is there's a gap in the database or the corpus. Corpus is just another word for database. Okay, so that's one problem. And then the other problem is simplification bias. And bias is a term that we often think about, like, we might think of gender bias or racial bias, but bias just means skewed in some way. And so if something is overly simplified, that is a form of bias. And I'm going to give you some examples here in just a minute. But first, let's talk about this issue of corpus gaps. A corpus is a database, okay? And basically what is happening here is we have a user, okay? This is the researcher. And then over here, we have an AI. So this can be
Kimberly,
ChatGPT.
you're
Yeah.
not your screen stop sharing.
Oh,
Oh, someone says they still see it.
I think it's, you might be on a different.
Okay, if they can see it, that's fine. There must
Okay.
be different about my view that
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. So this is what's happening with these, with all of these tools that I've been talking about. We have a user. This is you. This is the researcher, and we have an AI, a large language model. And in between, we have databases, and you've probably heard of these: Semantic Scholar, OpenAlex, PubMed, ERIC. There's a lot of them. Okay, and so basically, that is in the middle between you and the AI. You're talking to the AI is talking to the database is going back, and it's like a flow of conversation. And so if there's something missing in that database, then it's gonna seem like there's a gap in the literature. And we're all looking for a gap, right? We want to build on a gap. That's a really important aspect of scientific research. But if there's a gap in the database because that particular topic is behind a paywall and it can't be accessed through the AI, then you wouldn't see it. Okay. So let me give you an example. A lot of these tools use Semantic Scholar. Semantic Scholar has a lot of research on how, what is in it and what's not in it. And so the way that you read this is these are fields of study, okay, across the bottom. And up here is number of papers in the millions. So in Semantic Scholar's database, there are all these papers, millions and millions and millions of papers, and they're categorized into disciplines. Well, 60 million of them are uncategorized. We don't really know. Maybe they're interdisciplinary, or maybe, I mean, who knows? I don't know. This is not research I did, but this is public research about Semantic Scholars database. The next biggest category is medicine, followed by biology, physics, engineering, computer science, and chemistry. So we're looking at like biomedical sciences right here. Okay, that's a lot of papers. Yeah. Education is here, material science, environmental science. But as we get over here into the social sciences, we see the paper dropping off. Now, this is still millions. So, for example, in psychology, there's still 6.2 million papers. But that is not all the papers in psychology, because those are only the ones that are freely available in public access, open source databases, okay, in Semantic Scholars database. Here's my field over here, linguistics. 1.1 million papers. So it looks tiny, but it's a little bit deceiving because it's still over a million papers. But when I go to Semantic Scholar, I hardly find anything. Okay. So when I go to Litmaps, when I go to Perplexity, when I go to Elicit, those 3 tools that I showed you about earlier, they're not very helpful for me because in linguistics, a lot of our research is behind a paywall, unfortunately. Now, I have a library that I go to for that. So the point here is be careful because a gap can be found in the literature or a gap can be found in the corpus database. And if you don't know that about AI, then you might think that there's a gap when there's really not. Okay, this is really, really key, especially if you're a novice and you don't know what's already out there. If you're an expert and you know the seminal literature in your field, you don't have to worry about this as much because you would recognize that things are missing. But if you're a novice, you're not going to. So be really careful because, again, they're marketing to you. This is going to speed up your process. This is going to make you more productive, but maybe not. What do you have to do to solve this problem? You really have to mitigate your blind spots by triangulating. That means we can't stop using Google Scholar. We cannot stop using library databases. We're going to use them in addition to these AI research assistants. And that way we get a full picture of what's happening in the literature. Okay. Issue number 2 is this issue of oversimplifying very complex information. And this can often lead to incomplete or inaccurate understanding. I have a lot of slides on this. I'm getting toward the end of the time we have, so I really want to kind of speed through this and just jump into an example to show you what I'm talking about. But basically, when you get a high speed and a lot of volume, what you're going to lose is nuance and specificity. And nuance and specificity matters when it comes to methodology, population specifics, and implementation details in research. So it's a hidden trade-off. And you're going to be marketed by these companies that are going to say, speed up your research, superhuman power, productivity, but not everything needs to be speedy. So just be very careful with that. Okay. Let me scroll over to an example here. Here's an example why I think this is really important from the perspective of science. Let's imagine that you had a sentence and it's something like, according to research group Kantar World Panel, amid high levels of inflation, supply chain issues, and high energy costs impact the economy. In a simple paraphrase of the word amid, if that becomes something like due to, then it becomes a correlation to causation fallacy. So what these AI tools are doing is they're paraphrasing, and that's wonderful until they make a big jump from something like correlation, like amid, which means at the same time as, it's temporal, it's related to time, and it's paraphrased instead as due to, which means cause, reason, and result. That's a big leap. It looks tiny. It's just a small word. But this is my concern as a linguist with the paraphrasing that happens by these tools. So that's what I mean by simplification bias. There's a lot of other stuff that can happen. And if you want to read more, Jessica and I have a lot of writing on this on our Substack and again in our YouTube. And you can see more examples. You can hear us talk about this in more detail. Okay.
And
Yes.
I just want to say, because you just said that, and this is so important, with the consulting companies that I run, one of the biggest questions that we get is around editing. Like people are starting to just feed their work into ChatGPT and say, edit this for me, remove all grammatical issues and spelling errors. And what they don't realize is it's making minor changes like this. So unless you remember exactly what you wrote word for word, and unless you take the time to read the written product word for word to make sure it did not go beyond making grammatical or spelling changes, which it often does, then this is what you're risking. And so it's really important. Just a slight change in one word in research has a ripple effect in the meaning and the implications of that word. So this is why I do not recommend feeding your work into an LLM like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude and just saying, edit for me. Instead, ask it to identify the errors so that you can address them one by one in your own work, because these are major issues that we're starting to see in the literature. So I just wanted to highlight that because I get that a lot.
Yeah, that's a great follow on. Thank you. Okay, now let's move into the area of thinking, planning, writing. So let's imagine that you now have your literature, you're ready to write. You've thought through it, you know your topic, and you're planning and you're writing. If you were to go to ChatGPT, let's say, GIGO means garbage in, garbage out. Okay, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. This is the age-old computer principle. If you were to say to ChatGPT, help me improve this purpose statement, the study intends to address the blah, 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 blah. Okay, ChatGPT is going to say, certainly, happy to help you. And it's just going to output a better version of what you said. It's longer, it has more details, looks good, right? And then you're going to be like, wait a minute, is this okay? Can I just take this and put it in my writing? Well, we have to be very critical of this because, in my perspective, this is not okay. Because you did not do the struggle. You did not productively struggle with your purpose statement to get it from draft to final copy. And it's that productive struggle that is where you learn. Remember, your goal as a researcher is never just to produce a product, a deliverable thing. Obviously, yes, you do need to write your dissertation or thesis. You do need to publish. Your goal is to communicate expertise. And in order to do that, you have to have some productive struggle so that you can join the conversation that's already happening in the literature and communicate that as clearly as possible. So what we suggest instead of going directly to a model like ChatGPT or Claude is to use Moxie, because Moxie is a learning platform and it works with large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, but it does the prompting for you. And we have added educational safeguards to promote genuine learning and academic integrity. So you have yourself over here as a researcher, you have the large language model over here, and in between, we have done the prompting for you. We have added frameworks, we have added guardrails, we have told the machine how to coach you because we are academic coaches. So if you want to think about it another way, this is kind of the Gen AI research writing landscape. You've got this axis of like, okay, it's generating the text for you or it's coaching you. It's personalized or it's generic. Those are kind of your different choices. And you do have a lot of choices there in this framework. If you want something to write for you, you've got PaperPal, you've got Jenny, you've got Quillbot. These are starting to be banned in a lot of universities because they're sidestepping the real thinking that is supposed to happen, no matter who you are. As a student, as a researcher, the thinking is part of the writing. And so we are not in support of these kinds of writing for you ghostwriter types of programs. There's a couple of other programs that have academic guardrails and don't write for you. They sort of coach you. One of them is Thesify. So if you're looking for one-time feedback, where you can't iterate, you cannot ask questions, you just go to Thesify, you just want feedback and you wanna implement it, Thesify, that's what they do. So it's very generic, you can't follow up on it, you can't get a personal recommendation. Then Moxie is adaptive and iterative, it's research specific, and it provides a full life cycle of the research for you. So let me show you kind of what that looks like. Moxie's tools have, they follow the INRAD structure, the introduction, method, results, discussion, and conclusion that all research writers use, whether they're writing a lit review or a publication, dissertation, thesis, or a grant. There are pieces of the INRAD structure in all of those different genres of academic writing. So as I said before, Moxie has built-in guardrails. So it's like a chatbot, but it doesn't write for you. And if you ask it to, like here's a picture, a screenshot of Moxie's interface, write a new problem statement for me, because remember, in the example, you asked it to write a purpose statement or a problem statement, and Moxie will say, no, I am a coach. It's my job to guide you, and I will help you develop your ideas, but I'm not going to generate that text for you. I will help you find your voice. I will not replace your voice. So this is really important in terms of ethical AI. Moxie also has a lot of AI literacy training videos. As I said, these are our YouTube videos. They're directly built into Moxie. So if you get stuck, you can click on one, you can watch and learn, and then you can get back to work. We're empowering users with that kind of, really it's professional development. We use evidence-based coaching. So we use best practices in effective feedback to not only tell you what you did wrong, but to tell you what you did right and to help you see what you don't need to change, which is just as important as what you do need to change. And then finally, in terms of transparency, you can export each session and you could show it to somebody. So remember in the beginning, I said, could you defend what you did? Could you show it to somebody? And would you be proud of that? Well, with Moxie, you can, because it's not going to write for you. And it's going to help you. And then you can export that and you can show it to whoever is your supervisor, whether it's your professor or whether you wanted to show it to a journal editor if something came up. But again, transparency and enabling transparency is a really important part of our message. I have a few use cases here. I'm running out of time, but I want to tell you that all of our use cases basically use a framework that we call the AI sandwich, where you use AI to kind of ideate, brainstorm, and explore different perspectives. Then you as a human write the draft, you triangulate it with traditional methods, and then you come back to the AI and you get more feedback. So it's that iterative process of chatting with the bot, chatting with the machine to get you to where you want to be. And we have lots of different tools to do this. Okay, I'm going to speed through these so we have time for questions. You can get a diagnostic so you can diagnose your problems. We have a tool for that. If you're struggling to narrow your research topic, you could explore Moxie for that. And we have lots of ideas. If you're really stuck, you could, for example, upload a recently published article. Ask Moxie to suggest potential topic based on that, based on those findings. Maybe you really like a certain study that you found in Litmaps, but now you want to build on it. So you could use Moxie to do that. Lots of people have trouble with their theoretical frameworks. Moxie has a tool that can provide relevant content to help you understand the theory better, apply it in your writing better, and then get critical feedback. Let's say you have 3 theories and you don't know which one is best. You can use Moxie to sort of hone that and figure out where you're going. One of our most popular tools is getting feedback on a literature review. You can upload your draft and you can get feedback. And then if it's going in the wrong direction, which AI can do, even Moxie, then you can iterate on it and then you can ask it to change, or you can download it and you can show it to your professor and say, here's what I'm working on. Where am I getting stuck? Can you guide me in this? And so this is a huge benefit of using Moxie for literature review feedback. You could craft an outline. You could learn how to paraphrase. Each of these are Moxie tools that people are using right now for supporting their research writing. Let's say you have some feedback from your professor and you don't understand it at all. You could upload that to Moxie and get some clarity on trying to make priority action items for what to tackle first, what to tackle second. Really helpful. And just in general, you could ask anything. You can clarify terminology. You can ask for an explanation on something you think you should know. I remember as a graduate student, I was very afraid to raise my hand because I thought I should know all these things, which isn't true. And that's imposter syndrome. It's another thing. But you can get help when you need help and create an action plan to reach a deadline. Okay, I'm totally out of time. So I'm just going to skip to my takeaways and then offer to answer any questions. Basically, what we're saying is if you're struggling to understand ethical AI, you need to apply the same standards you would use for human collaboration. If you would not ask a human to do it and then reproduce that as your work, then you shouldn't be doing that with AI. If you do use AI, you need to acknowledge that assistance, just as you would acknowledge human contributions. And one way that you can do that is with the AI sandwich framework, which Moxie has sort of built into all its tools. And now I'm just going to open it up for a few minutes of questions or comments from Jessica.
Kimberly, that was great. I have to jump to another meeting, so I'm gonna leave you to it, but I answered all the questions in the Q&A. There were some really good ones if you wanna look through there. There were questions about, data privacy, which I addressed. There was also a question about human in the loop. So I don't know if you wanna look at those and go into a bit more detail, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I see a question about AI putting more weight. I think Jessica answered that one right. It depends on the algorithm. Yeah, we can't really know. How do you see your method fit the hybrid intelligence? Yeah, so I think we answered that with the AI sandwich. How are you working your use of Litmaps, Perplexity, and Elicit into your use of existing tools like Zotero and Mendeley? Yeah. Um, so I'm not using Litmaps, Perplexity, and Elicit again because my discipline is not represented there. If my discipline were represented, I would start to look for an AI research tool that integrates with Zotero or Mendeley or whatever I was using because they are starting to do that. They have application interfaces where you can, and so that may be the way you decide which one is best for you, is which one already integrates with what your current workflows involve. Yeah, and the intellectual property. Yeah, I mean, you have the option to turn that off in any AI. Moxie's fully private, but in ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, if you want to go directly to them, then you can do that. Or you can turn off chat, saving your chats, and you can turn off sharing your intellectual property with the company. Any other questions? Will this be made? Yes. All of our webinars are free and they're all made available on YouTube along with the slides, which will be in the description of the YouTube video. We usually get those out within 24 hours. So yeah, and I'm happy also to answer questions. I'm going to put my email in because I know this was like fast and furious. All right, everyone. Thanks for attending and please reach out if you have any questions.